Once again, Nigeria's inflation has surged to 20.52% in the month of August, according to figures from the National Bureau of Statistics, and that's hitting the highest since the year 2005, according to Nairalytics, a portal that monitors economic data in the country. Welcome to Business Daily on Trust Television, where we'll bring you all the information you need to know in the world of business. We'll bring you factual updates and analysis on key developments in the front of the Nigerian economy. Also, where we try to give these numbers a human face. I am your host, Christiana Amodu Otinya. Thank you for joining in. On today's edition of the program, our focal point will be on the recently released inflation figures, and also we'll be tracking how this figure will impact the mood of the Nigerian capital market. Now, I will be joined by Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Finance and Capital Market and President, Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria, ACMAN. He will be giving perspective to this issue. How will this affect the closing of the Nigerian exchange? Now, inflation is one of the key data that investors monitor, especially investors on bourses across the world. So Professor Uche Uwaleke will be telling us more after we take a short break on how we can ensure that we taper inflation in Nigeria and what's the outlook and projection for inflation in the country. I'll take a short break. When I return, the program will continue. Please stay.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back, and thank you for still staying there with us on the program. This is Business Daily on Trust TV. I have my guest with me now in the studio. He's Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Finance and Capital Market, also the President of Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria, ACMAN. Welcome to the program, Prof.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Yes.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Now, Prof, just before we went on that short breather, I mentioned that we saw the breaking news that came in from the National Bureau of Statistics talking about Nigeria's inflation rate surging to 20.52% in the month of August. Now, we're able to put some key data from that release out, so would give our audience a view of what it's like. Now, Nigerian inflation rate surged further to 20.52% in the month of August, up from 19.64%. This represents the highest rate since September 2005. The index rose 1.77% compared to 1.82 on a month-on-month basis. Urban inflation stood at 20.95%. Rural inflation rate in August was at 20.12%. Food inflation, which is a very key in that report, 23.12%. This was as a result of rise in the prices of bread, cereals, food products, potatoes, yam, and other tubers, fish, meat, oil, and fat. Now, Nigeria's inflation rate has continued to climb, and now we are seeing this surge coming from the month of August. If we take a look at the next slide, now the average annual rate of food inflation for the 12-month period ending August 2022 was over the previous 12-month average of 19.02%. It was highest in Ebonyi State, Rivers State, Bayelsa State, while Jigawa and Borno State recorded the lowest. Now Zamfara recorded the slowest rise in headline year-on-year. Food inflation, on the other hand, year-on-year was highest in Kwara, 30.80%, Ebonyi 28.06%, and Rivers 27.64%. Jigawa, Zamfara State, Oyo State recorded the slowest rise year-on-year on food inflation. Now we are seeing these numbers go up, Prof. Let me bring you into the picture. Now, once again, another inflation report, another hike.
Yeah.
How would you explain this situation, or what's your assessment of the situation?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. First, let me commend the National Bureau of Statistics for the timely release of CPI numbers. That's the Consumer Price Index numbers. What we have now is for August, and if you look at some other countries, what you get there is as of July. But for Nigeria, we already have that, yes, that of August. The other thing I need to note is that for the first time in the National Bureau of Statistics reports, to the best of my knowledge, you find there too likely reasons, why the general price level, has risen for the month of August. Because in that report, it stated clearly that the all items inflation rates, that's talking about headline inflation, rose principally on account of three factors. In that report, yes, okay, it talked about the supply disruptions. The report also talks about the exchange rate issues, and of course, what has always been known, if you like, the legacy issue, rising cost of production. So these are the three major drivers of inflation in Nigeria, and it didn't come as a surprise that it's now exceeding 20%. Again, if you look at it against the backdrop of what is happening across the globe, on account of, largely on account of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Yes. Even in developed economies, they're also battling the same problem. In the U.S., inflation rate is in excess of 8%. The Federal Reserve is having, that is giving the Federal Reserve a headache. In the UK, Bank of England is also worried about inflation. Eurozone is also having the same issue, over 8%, and these are unprecedented, rates. And in Africa, yes, we also have the same issue. Zimbabwe is taking the lead as the country with the highest inflation rate in Africa at over 280%. I think 285%. Okay, you have other countries with high inflation. Ghana, for example, neighboring Ghana, 33.9%.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And Ethiopia, 32%. So ours, 20.52%, you might say is relatively not as high as we have in others, but it's still a concern because the trend has been that way since January. And if you look at what we put in the budget, the 2022 budget, that expected inflation to come in at 13%, max. Already by August, we are, yes, having a 20.52.
Yes.
And there is nothing in the firmament to suggest that, it will slow down considerably before, December. And that's, again, as a result of the fact that these factors that have been mentioned, driving inflation,
yes,
are very much, there, and they are gaining in intensity, as the day, okay, as days go by.
Okay, Prof, thank you for that background. I specifically like the fact that you talked about other climes where we are seeing that inflation is becoming a global challenge and not just Nigeria.
Yes.
However, we have this report talking about economic experts, Emeka Okengu, and also some Nigerians speaking on this recently released inflation figures, how the figure basically is also affecting their businesses and what they think about how these can be addressed. Take a listen.
Transportation is one of the factors that have made the inflation of goods and other commodities very high. Most of the commodities are being brought into Abuja from other states, making it difficult for poor man to afford. Eating is a necessity for man. The goods have gone up exorbitantly, making it difficult for we the sellers to make the kind of profit we are making.
Last year or last 2 years ago, we are selling like 1.5 or 1.3 or 1.7. So I'm for now, the thing is very cost. If you need a very big one, true, you go reach 4,000, 4,500. It is expensive, too much to the nation, to the country. And the transport motor you are going to supply from Bled, and you are bringing it to Abuja, and you are dropping, and the shop, you are paying the revenue allocation. And that's what we are going to calculate to anything complete our money. We say we put small game, like 50 naira, 100 naira. That is the thing, is making the chicken cost.
This was predicted now. It was easy for us to know that we are going to get here eventually. And what would be the drivers? Basically 2 or 3 things you need to look at, okay? Look at your capacity to be able to produce food internally. Look at the rising cost of your forex, okay? And then look at your insecurity. These are basically, the things you need to measure against a prediction. So this was a war or a disaster or a situation rather, okay? Because it's not a disaster, it's a situation, albeit not a very palatable one that was easy to have been predicted. So it's not a shocker. Well, for me, I think necessity has to become the father of a new invention. So it's not about what is going to play out. What is going to play out is foretold again, it's known. In an inflation, people are going to lose jobs. Okay, prices are going to skyrocket. There's going to be more depression. There's going to be more aggression. So all those are known. But what should bother us now is not the consequences of high inflation. It should be, how do we begin to address it? Because it's like asking somebody, is it a sunny day? The person is asking you for a handkerchief to wipe their faces, and it's sunny. We are under the sun now. We're under a lot of intense pressure and heat. So it's for government to begin to now, look at social services and social engagements that might be able to help to cushion this. Okay, cushion the effects of where we're going to on the citizenry, especially the underserved, if you may, the people in the underground economy. We need, what were they calling that thing in COVID? Palliatives. Okay, this is the time, I think, that government needs to begin to now engage, in direct palliatives distribution. So you need to start calling out people. Okay, this is where your M&E structures, come to play. All right, who is monitoring, who is evaluating, who is oversighting? Okay, for everything you do, the moment you have somebody overlooking it, right, he doesn't have to use a whip, okay, but sometimes you can calmly be, pressured into line. So if there are any failures, it will be the failure of responsibility.
Dr. Emeka Okengwu there speaking on palliatives. And Prof, like I was stating, I think the lexicon palliative has really come to stay with us in Nigeria after the whole COVID-19 challenge that the country faced. Now, I want you to react with what he has opined there. He's saying now that we need palliatives as buffers to help cushion the effects of inflation, because we already know the causes. Now,
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Do you share in that sentiment?
Well, palliatives can come in several forms, but I don't think we need, at this moment, we need palliatives in the way they were implemented, during the COVID, literally handing out money to the citizens, because that could also compound the issue. If you are looking at inflation from the angle of the demand side, yes, you have the supply is limited, and demand, on the other side is higher. Okay, you end up compounding the inflationary problem. But palliatives, yes, can come by way of maybe the central bank rethinking the idea of increasing the rate at which it has been intervening. As
Yes.
you know, during the COVID, central bank dropped that intervention rate from 9% to 5%. But recently, central bank has moved it up again, from 5 to 9%.
Yes.
Okay, maybe given the prevailing circumstance, the high inflation rate, maybe the central bank could, you know, still leave it at that 5%, you know, for a while. So for me, that would be also a way of cushioning the effect and ensuring that, you know, credit that goes out there is cheap, and micro, medium, and small enterprises can actually access them at a very low rate, you know, during this inflationary period. But saying we'll do palliatives where we did it at that time, you know, or ramping up interventions, you know, may exacerbate the inflationary pressure. But for me, what is more important is dealing with trying to tackle the root, you know, the cause of the pressure. Okay, insecurity has been cited. Of course, that is major. We should continue to deal with it to ensure that these farmers, are able to go to farms. Okay, and then there is also the rising cost of, energy, electricity. Okay, and then transport.
Yes, just like the trade I mentioned there in that report.
Transport, and for me that also accounts for why you have this disparity between where it is highest, you know, the state-wise disaggregation. It's highest in Kwara. Food inflation is highest in Kwara at over 30%, and then lowest in Jigawa, you know, at around 17%. So you're looking at the distance. Okay, part of what could cause that, you know, could also be, high transport fare. And again, food inflation is higher in the urban areas, you know, than in the rural areas. So transport could also, high cost of transport could also account for, you know, that differential, because it costs more to now move produce from the rural areas, you know, to the urban areas. So if we look at the drivers of inflation and see to what extent we can tackle them, I think that is, for me, the right approach.
Yes.
So not only the short term, it will also, you know, be dealing with it both in the medium, you know, to a long term. Yes, I'm aware that some economies are using even subsidies. Like in Europe, for example, we hear that doing energy subsidies, you know, to subsidize the energy cuts. But again, in Nigeria, we already have subsidy on fuel, and again, is this something that we can afford to do? You know, giving governments fiscal situation. Okay, so all these things must be taken on balance, you know, to be sure that one thing we do does not compound, you know.
Prof, so just to be clear, if palliatives must come in for you, it should come in from some sort of regulatory angle, talking about from the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Of the interest rate on loans.
Yes. Not handouts.
No, not handouts. Absolutely not handouts, you know, at this time. Because even the ones that the central bank gave out and the government gave out, some of them were even given out even as facilities, credit facilities. Okay, we don't know how, whether they have been returned.
Yes.
Okay, so I will encourage improving access, to credit facilities, not only on the part of the central bank, but even for the commercial banks themselves. The central bank should find a way of, if moral suasion is not working, find a way of getting the banks to increase access, increase, the credit they're channeling to the private sector.
Prof, still sticking with the central bank, like you have rightly mentioned, I know that's clearly your turf, that you monitor a whole lot. Now, what does this mean for the monetary policy authorities? We expect that the MPC would also take this into consideration in the next meeting.
Yes.
So what should we expect in terms for the MPR and the key rates that the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, consider?
Yes, the MPC is scheduled for in another meeting later this month.
Yes.
I expect that the key rate will be held, although that may not happen. But if you're asking me, for a member of the MPC, I would vote for a hold position. I wouldn't be asking the MPC, for example, to increase the monetary policy rate at 14%, at the current 14%, because for me, that's already a tightening situation. But it does appear, going by feelers and even from the what was revealed during the last MPC, the central bank is prepared to continue the monetary policy tightening,
Yes.
as long as inflation rate is going up. But for me, that may not be, an appropriate approach, in the sense that when you are tightening monetary policy, you are doing that because you want to curtail money supply, you want to curtail demand. So those monetary policy tools, the traditional monetary policy tools, are designed to address the demand side, if you like, monetary factors that induce inflation. When we say inflation is caused by either demand pull or cost push, when it is demand pull, that's when you can use those rates to tackle them. But when it has been established, the MBS has said it clearly, that it is more of a cost push inflation. Okay, you don't tighten monetary policy to be able to do that. So a lot of work needs to be done by the fiscal side, by the government, while the central bank continues to deploy its development finance function, its interventions, well-targeted interventions, to be able to increase output, increase food output. So for me, that should be the strategy, rather than saying we want to, because the more you tighten, the more you increase rates, remember, it also has an effect on economic growth.
Yes.
It's likely to further weaken, economic growth. Again, people won't have access to credit, and then the economy will slow down. So I'm sure the central bank will be also, weighing that. The only advantage that increasing rates will have will be possibly on the exchange rates, reducing the pressure on the exchange rate. But we also know that the problem we're having with respect to the forex market today is more in the parallel market, where you have a lot of speculation going on. So even when you increase the MPR, for example, and there is still that expectation that the naira will weaken, speculative activities will continue.
Prof, I want you to speak. You just mentioned the fact that we are seeing the central bank trying to rein in on inflation.
Yes.
Now let's look at the fiscal authorities, because you have also said that there's a whole lot that needs to be done in that bracket.
Yes.
When you were speaking earlier on, you spoke about fuel subsidy.
Yes.
Talking about the Minister of Finance have said we're going to have fuel subsidy, and the head of the NNPCL said we're going to have fuel subsidy till mid-2023.
Yes.
Now, how do you foresee, what are your projections for that, and how it will equally affect the inflation figure, considering rising energy costs, energy's cost also?
Yes, yes. I sympathize with the government. The government appears to be, in a sort of a fix, because if you pull out subsidies now, of course, it will compound the inflationary, situation, at least in the short term. But the fact remains that that the subsidy regime is not helping this economy. If you really analyze it. But again, as I said, the government will be looking at it from the inflation angle, the immediate impact, and the government will also be looking at it, from the political angle. Of course, it has a political angle. If you pull out subsidy, that could also make the government unpopular, and we are in approaching election period, and so on. So that's why they are talking about next year. But I think the government can also address the low-hanging fruits, that also impact inflation, which are, for example, the issue of insecurity. I don't see why this insecurity situation cannot be seriously dealt with. Part of also why we're having this inflation challenge.
Prof, now because of time constraints, there are some questions I want you to treat before we go. I think we're almost out of time. We hope to bring you back, of course. We know you always be ready to oblige us whenever we call on you. Now, I want you to quickly answer two questions. First question is, how do you see these inflation numbers affecting the capital market? We know that the opening gong has gone up. So to close of market today, what are your projections? And also, talking about the underemployment, unemployment, and misery index, what are your projections for this? Quickly, sir, just attend to these two questions.
Yes. Bearish market, we're already beginning to see it. The inflation number you saw yesterday, had already been, taken care of by the market before now. So the market had expected it and had, been reacting to it even before now. That's why you saw that for the week-to-date return is in negative territory. In fact, throughout this week, all through the week, the market, has been down, minus 0.59%. Okay, that's week-to-date.
Yes.
No, that's month-to-date return.
Month-to-date return.
Then week-to-date return is around minus 0.3. And if you look at year-to-date return, that has gone down to now 15.9, below inflation rate of 20.52%. So what's the impact? The rate of return from the market is now now negative. That's even in spite of the fact that some companies have released results and even declared interim dividends.
Yes.
So inflation is actually impacting negatively on the capital market.
Then quickly, projections, unemployment, underemployment, misery index, inflation impact on that.
Yes. It was only yesterday I was discussing with the MBS CEO, and I asked him, how about the unemployment figures? And he said, they will soon be out. But the reality is that high inflation, is also correlated to unemployment. So you have high inflation, and
high unemployment.
Yes, high unemployment. They go together because eventually firms will end up, relieving workers of their jobs.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you for your time, spending your time with us this morning on the program. We hope to have you come in and really discuss probably a capital market 101. Tell the investing public what they need to do and bring into the capital market.
I'm very positive the market will rebound.
Okay, I like that. We're ending on a very optimistic note there from Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Finance and Capital Market, and also the President, Association of Capital Market Academics, ACMAN of Nigeria. Thank you also for investing your time with me on the program. Don't forget you can catch up on all you need to know, news updates in the world of business and also in the country on our social media platforms, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram. Get all you need to know on news making the rounds in the country. My name is Christiana Amodu Otinya. Have a good day.